Thank you so much, Keith. Yes, my name is Paul Belson. I am the Conservation Project Manager at Southern Oregon Land Conservancy. I've been here for about 3.5 years and love my job, love what I do. And 2019 has been a great year for conservation projects. I want to show you some slides to take you a tour through our projects this year. Just get myself situated. This is a photograph of southern Rogue Valley looking toward the Ashland Watershed. And it's a beautiful image. Next slide. So 2019 Conservation Project Summary. We completed 3 conservation projects in 2019, 2 conservation easements, and I just want to give a summary of what a conservation easement is. A conservation easement is a voluntary agreement with the landowner and a land trust that protects important conservation values on the property. Our conservation easements protect against subdivision and selling off portions of properties, protect against clear cutting, protect against mining, and basically keeps lands intact and encourages sustainable and smart management of properties. We also acquired 1 fee ownership property in Wolf Creek. This is far northern Josephine County. We started 5 projects in 2019 and looking forward to finishing those in the coming years. We also initiated an outreach project in the Bear Creek Watershed area, and I will tell you a little bit about that in a minute. Next slide. The conservation easement projects we completed are in the Colston Valley Siskiyou Summit focus area. And the map you're looking at, there's a lot going on there, but basically on the left side towards the west is the Klamath National Forest and the Klamath Mountains. And to the right on the east is a lot of land owned by the Bureau of Land Management, BLM, and it's also the Cascade Siskiyou National Monument. The green areas on the map are areas we protect with conservation easements that we hold on privately owned lands. So our strategy here is to help make a bridge of sorts between the protected lands to the west in the Klamath National Forest and the lands to the east in the Cascade Siskiyou National Monument. This will help build kind of a wildlife bridge and protected corridor between these 2 important areas. Next slide. So this property is one of those properties that we protected with a conservation easement. And this one is in the Siskiyou Summit area. And this property is very unique. This area is very unique. It is also between the Klamath Mountains and areas toward the west, Cascade Siskiyou National Monument. This picture is looking towards the south and towards the west. And what's unique about this property is it drains to 2 different basins. So this image is looking towards the south, draining towards the Klamath Basin, and the other part of the property drains toward the Rogue Basin. And so in some ways, our conservation of this property is benefiting both basins. It's a beautiful montane forest with meadows, springs, and seeps, and it's just a wonderful area. Next slide. This is that same property looking toward the north. This is the part that drains to the Rogue Basin. Again, beautiful, beautiful property. Next slide. So the conservation values we're protecting with our conservation easement on this property are the montane fir forests, meadows, the montane chaparral, the springs and seeps. This property is also immediately adjacent to the Klamath National Forest. So our conservation on this property benefits the wildlife and conservation values on the adjacent property as well. There are also special status species on this property. It's incredibly scenic, being on the Siskiyou Summit, and it also features a portion of the Pacific Crest Trail running right through it. And we'd like to say thank you to the Pacific Crest Trail Association for contributing funds to help us do this project. Next slide. This is the second conservation easement we completed in 2019, and this is in the Colston Valley. So on the map I showed you, this property would be toward the southern portion of that map. This photograph is looking towards the south. You can see way in the distance Mount Shasta. And this is also a very important ecological area, as I mentioned. Protecting these properties helps us build the bridge between the Klamath and the Cascade-Siskiyou National Monument. And Southern Oregon Land Conservancy holds several conservation easements in this area. Next. Again, another beautiful photograph from this property looking to the Colston Valley. So on this project, we are protecting magical oak woodlands and chaparral, native bunch grasses, mixed conifer forests, and there's also an agriculture working lands component to this particular property. There are special status species, and it's near protected lands. It's about a stone's throw from the Klamath National Forest to the west. To the east, there are conservation easements held by Southern Oregon Land Conservancy. And then a little bit further to the east is the Cascade-Siskiyou National Monument. Next. Now we're moving to the north part of our area. This is a picture of Strong Reservoir, which was created in the 60s. And this reservoir captures Sourdough Gulch Creek. And this property is a very unique one for Southern Oregon Land Conservancy, both in its aspect and how the transaction came to us. Next slide. So this project is actually a land donation to the Southern Oregon Land Conservancy. A very generous landowner donated this property so that it could be conserved. Southern Oregon Land Conservancy will protect this property with a conservation easement in perpetuity. We will sell the property to a conservation buyer with a conservation easement in place. So in a sense, we have what I call a triple benefit here. We achieve conservation of the land itself, which I will talk about in a minute. And then we will also be able to use the proceeds to support our mission to do great conservation work in our region. And also the donor gets to leave a legacy of conservation of the property and meet a lifelong goal. Next slide. So we call this Sourdough Gulch Ranch, and the conservation values summary are, it's a very large property, one of our largest ones, not the largest, but it's 809 acres, 700 acres of maturing forest. There are streams and springs, meadows and pastures, and there's diversity on this property, diversity of land types. We have pastures for agriculture, we have forests, we have riparian areas. There's diversity of topography. We have north facing, south facing, we have very steep slope, we have some gradual areas. And there are diversity of species as well. Another important aspect of this property is that it's adjacent to some important BLM lands. This is Bureau of Land Management. And these particular lands, some of them are managed for old growth forest, and they're also managed to provide critical habitat for the northern spotted owl. Next. Some beautiful photos of the property. This is the Legacy Oak down next to Wolf Creek and adjacent to this beautiful pasture. And then far in the distance there, you can see the riparian area of Sourdough Gulch. Next. This is an upper pasture photograph looking at some of the forest. One thing I like about this property is you can be in different areas and it feels like a different world that you're in. The property has water resources too. I mentioned Sourdough Gulch, which feeds the reservoir. There's also Wolf Creek, pictured on your right, which is an important salmon-bearing, fish-bearing stream, provides cold water to Graves Creek watershed and then onto the Rogue River. So protecting this area will help to provide cold water to benefit fish. Next slide. Here's some picture of the forests, diverse species. This property has a history of logging behind it, so we're happy to protect it and see it managed for old growth habitat in the future. Next. And finally, here's a map of the property. So as I said, this is far Josephine County, far, probably our most northern part of our service area. To the left is I-5 running north-south. On the bottom of the map is the blue line is Wolf Creek flowing from the east to the west. And then Sourdough Gulch flows from the north to the south. The property is outlined in yellow. Next. So finally, I want to talk about our outreach project in the Upper Bear Creek Watershed, which is also our Cascade Foothills focus area. Next. This is part of Southern Oregon Land Conservancy's strategic plan to look for strategic conservation opportunities in one of our focus areas. And we decided to pick the Cascade Foothills focus area for this year. Our project goals are quite simple. We want to reach out to landowners in the project area, tell them a little bit about Southern Oregon Land Conservancy, and tell them about conservation opportunities that might be good for them. We're looking for opportunities where landowners are interested in conservation, where we also have high functioning habitat, priority habitat types, and really good habitat quality as well. Next. Here's a map of the area. Many of you will recognize this straight away. There's Ashland in the middle, Bear Creek running diagonally from the southwest to the southeast to the northwest. Important fish-bearing stream, as is Wagner Creek. This area, as you know, is very scenic, provides a lot of scenic attributes to the southern Rogue Valley. It also experiences a lot of population pressure. Most of the population in Southern Oregon in our region is located in this corridor. So that puts a lot of pressure on the land and provides an opportunity to do some good conservation work as well. The sort of gray dashed line that you might be able to make out on the right side of the map is the boundary for the Cascade-Siskiyou National Monument expansion. The green areas on the map are, or the green squares are conservation easements and conservation lands held by Southern Oregon Land Conservancy. And the green outline is the Bear Creek Watershed. So we're focusing on the upper portion of this area on either side of Ashland. And we don't have a whole lot going on here in terms of our conservation land. So we're out there looking for opportunities. And one of the challenges of a land trust is reaching out to landowners and letting them know what we do and see if there might be an opportunity there. Next. So the project has a couple phases to it. We've been doing data gathering and background information, doing some strategic mapping, identifying key project partners, refining our conservation criteria, and then we're going to be conducting outreach, mailings, meetings, information sharing. I will say that, you know, like lots of things, COVID-19 has sort of confounded the progress of this particular project. We envision meeting together with landowners and talking face-to-face, sitting around the table, and that's been impossible to do recently. So we hope to do that in the near future if it's possible. Thank you very much for your time. I've been happy to share the conservation projects with you. And here's to more in the future.